morning. How are we doing? Born and raised October 24th, 1939, South Portland, Maine.
Today, we travel to a place that celebrates courage and sacrifice, culminating in the creation of the Maine Military Museum.
Now come on in here. This is phase one of the museum. In 1956, the day I turned 17, I left here. I went down to join the Marine Corps, got this far with the gunny, and there was a whole rank of us. And he said, "Gentlemen, you take that oath, you're Marines." And I looked around, nah, it's not for me. Walked out the door, and a guy looked just like me, white mustache, white hair, put his arm on my shoulder and said, "Son, come here." And the next morning, I was in Lackland Air Force Base, joined the Air Force.
I'm General Carson, and I want to welcome you to Lackland Air Force Base.
Now over here, that's me when I was 17 years and 1 week old. When I joined, got out of boot camp, and there were 80 men on my flight, and only 6 of us got stripes, so I was very proud of that. Well, then I asked the sergeant, "Where am I going?" He said, "You're going to Wright-Patterson, Dayton, Ohio." And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "I don't give a damn. When you get there, you'll find out." This is what I did. That's the Atlas missile behind it. That's all burned down, gone to the ground, but that's when I got my second stripe. So I got there, and I was a unit called Orientation Group, and it was a place for POWs who had survived the war. And this goes back to my training days at Wright-Patterson with the Orientation Group. So here I am in 1957, and with all these gentlemen, and out of 280 men on my squadron, 80 of them were former prisoners of war. 20 of them from the Bataan Death March in the South Pacific. And so I'm 17 years old, and I'm listening to all these guys talk and tell their stories, and it was a wonderful education for me. This is my newest and biggest exhibit, and it's all Desert Storm, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and it's all real and it's all been donated. In 1943, before my father was shipping out for the South Pacific, I tried to take the ribbons off his uniform. So I've always had an interest. And then I started collecting military patches. Last flight suit I ever wore, I ended up with over 15,000 military patches. And you see, you have to have a call sign. And I got a choice, either Chatty Cathy or Magpie, so I took Magpie. And Magpie's a bird that never shuts up, so that's why I got the call sign for it. And that patch is from 1957. That's our original patch. Well, I've always loved patches because they represent the history of the units. They tell a story, and there are thousands upon thousands of them. And then came the POWs. To start off, every hat and helmet you see up here belongs to a POW, either before they were shot down or after they came home. And this is Larry Chesley. He'd been a prisoner 3 years before he got his first package, and in the package were a pair of sweat socks. And he said, "Lee, my feet never got cold, but my head froze." He stole a razor blade, he made his own needle and thread, and he made a hat out of the socks. It's pretty neat. So come on, let's come over and see the other part of it. Meet Admiral Gus Kinnear, one of my heroes. He's since passed away. He's one of only 4 men in the 20th century who went from an E1 right after Pearl Harbor. He quit high school, joined the Navy, and go to 4 stars without ever having a high school education. That's his combat uniform, his dress uniform. And the sad part is his daughters were going to throw all this in the trash until Gus found me. That's a shame. Now come on down here. All prisoner of war. One day I'm in my office in Northern California, and a gentleman walked through the door, and he said, "You don't know me, but you're going to wanna." And he smiled and he introduced me. He said, "I'm Ray Merritt, and I was a prisoner for 7.5 years in Vietnam. And I understand that you do things and have an interest." And so he pulled out the bracelets, because that's all I had at the time was POW bracelets, and I still have over 2,000 of them. And then he gave me a book, and he said, "Lee, this is the Bible." He said, "You protect it with your life." And he was serious. He said, because it has the name, address, phone number, emails of every living POW and those who have passed on. And he said, it's very privileged information. He said, but you use it. So I was thrilled. A couple days later, I called the first POW, and I'll never forget him. I cannot use the language he used at me on the phone as to how I got his phone number, but he was violently upset. And then I said, he said, where did you get this? And I said, from Ray Merritt. He said, Ray, what do you need? And a week later, a box came in the mail, never forget it, about yay big. POW uniforms, paraphernalia, everything that he had. And I ended up, slowly but surely, the POWs came to trust me to the point that to this day, they gave me a title that I will put on my gravestone, if I have one, which is Keeper of the Flame, because I've told their story. 80% of everything that came out of Hanoi in 1973, I personally own. I have some of it on loan to the Smithsonian, some of it to Wright-Patterson, some of it that I had out at the Nixon Library. I've always tried to share it, but only on loan because I protect their things. But the largest collection of it is here in this museum. That's an authentic leg iron from Hanoi, and only 2 are in this country. Although this is not the biggest museum in the world, it is the singular, most well-known museum in all of Europe and Asia. We've had thousands of them come all over the world to see this small little museum because there's nowhere like it. 60% of what's in this museum exists nowhere in the world but here. And I'm very proud of that because we built all this in 18 years from nothing. If somebody said hello to you, everything that comes here is all donated. We don't buy anything. Come on down here. Come see World War I. That's what I want to leave so that after I'm gone, kids can come through here, the grandkids of people who've been here, and see this and understand what American history really is. And here, just one last bit, because you got to meet my father if you meet nobody else. This is my father in World War II. So there's a million more things, but that'll wrap it up for now. Oh, nope, you got to see my great-great-grandfather. He was killed on the first day of the battle at Gettysburg in the outskirts of the city, and an 11-year-old girl found him, and that picture was in his hands. The last thing he saw before he died was his children. The one word that key to me is remembering, because when you forget, you step into the myths and you step into the abyss of not knowing what history is. What do you think? So you have to remember. You have to be able to tell the stories of those people, no matter how little they did or how much they did. Because if you don't, who's going to remember? Who's going to say, we can't make that same mistake all over again? Because we will. And that's the end of my story.